Welcome and thanks for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During today's Q&A session, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star then one. Today's call is also being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn today's meeting over to your host, Ms. Pooja Patel. Thank you. You may begin.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Pooja Patel, and I am the program manager for the CDFI program and the NACA program within the CDFI fund. As a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded, and it will be available on our website along with all of our other application materials. Next slide, please. And before we get started, I just want to quickly note and go over some topics that we will not be covering today during our Q&A session. We will not be going over why an organization was unsuccessful in past years. We will not be providing in-depth instructions on how to enter application data into the CDFI Fund's award management system, also known as AMIS. Further, we will not be addressing matching funds questions, specifically because under the NACA program, matching funds requirements are waived for native CDFIs. And then finally, we will not be answering questions about the CDFI, the revised CDFI certification application. For questions related to CDFI certification, we encourage folks to visit the CDFI certification page, also available on the website. And with that, we'll move to the next slide. Today, we're going to spend most of our time just getting questions from folks on the line and doing our best to answer the questions that are there that you guys have for us, but just a few quick things I just want to quickly note before we dive into questions. So the first, I just want to point out, kind of where we're at in terms of critical deadlines for all applicants. As you know, some of the critical deadlines have passed, and I want to draw special attention to the deadlines that are coming up, which include the last day to contact the CDFI program or NACA program staff for questions. That is on February 13th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Again, another deadline I want to point out is that the last day to contact the AMIS IT help desk, specifically for questions related to AMIS technical issues that you might be having. The deadline is February 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then the last day to submit Title VI compliance worksheet as well as your CDFI program and NACA or NACA program application is February 15th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And you can see also on the slide how you may reach out to us if you have questions or if you need to reach us for anything. Next slide, please. All right, and then just a few additional deadlines specifically for FA applicants who are uncertified and looking to apply for an FA award. The last day to contact the CCME help desk regarding CDFI certification application is March 1st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And then the last day to submit your CDFI certification application, if you are an uncertified entity applying for an FA award, is March 5th at 11:59 p.m. as well, Eastern. Next slide. One thing I just wanted to quickly note, it was brought to our attention that the maximum TA award request amount in the executive summary of the CDFI program and the NACA program NOFAs was incorrect, and so we have issued a technical correction to the NOFA, but I do just want to reiterate for folks that that Table 2 of both the CDFI program and the NACA program NOFAs has the correct TA award request amount, and That means that for the CDFI program, the maximum TA award request amount is $300,000, and for the NACA program, the maximum TA award request amount is $400,000. And again, there is a technical correction that was posted to the Federal Register, and if you are looking for a copy of that, it is available on the CDFI Fund's website, where you can find the NACA and CDFI program application materials. Next slide. Yeah. So that's it. Those are the quick reminders I had for folks as you are looking to kind of wrap up applications. We will now move into question and answer, and I will let the operator reiterate the instructions for asking questions. Just as a reminder, we have disabled the chat feature and the Q&A feature in WebEx so that everyone can ask questions by phone and so that everyone can hear the responses to any of the questions that are being asked. With that, we'll open it up for questions.
As a quick reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then 1. Remember to unmute your phone, and record your name clearly when prompted. If you'd like to withdraw your question, you may press star 2. Again, to ask a question, please press star followed by 1. One moment for our first question. Okay, our first question, I believe, is from chat. Your line is open.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have a question. I'm working with a tribal entity development corporation that has a for-profit subsidiary that does its financing. They're looking to apply for their, they've never done anything with the CDFI fund. They're looking to apply for a TA. Do they apply under a sponsoring entity or as an emerging CDFI?
I think that depends. We have staff on the line who are also here to answer questions, and they can jump in if they have anything to add, but I'll get it started. I think that the answer to that question depends. Basically, if they are the entity that is looking to get certified, then they would apply directly.
They're not. They're a tribal development finance corp that's owned by a tribal development corp that's owned by the tribe, and it's so right now they have nothing. They're not a CDFI. They're already doing lending. They want to incorporate as a CDFI and use the TA grant to help them do that. And I don't know if whether I should. I mean, they're emerging because they've got some of their ducks in a row, but they're also it's the tribal entity that is sort of sponsoring them. So again, I don't know if it matters or if one is better than the other. My sense is they're an emerging CDFI.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key there again is if the applicant that is applying must be the entity that gets certified, and so in what you're describing, it does seem like the sponsoring entity model works if the tribe or a tribally affiliated entity is looking to kind of sponsor the entity. The entity can apply directly as well for TA, but in that, regardless of either one of those scenarios, well, not either one of those, but if essentially depending on the entity that's applying, ultimately the entity that's getting, it depends on the entity that's getting certified. I'm sorry, I know I went kind of in a circle, but
sure.
Let me, please feel free to repeat.
I can jump in quickly too, Pooja. This is Tanya Vardavarian on the CDFI NACA program team as well. I mean, basically, it seems to me like the entity that is applying will be a different legal entity that will actually then carry out the activity of the award. So then the sponsoring entity model would that makes sense. Okay, great. The program is the only scenario in which the applicant who's applying does not have to be the legal entity that's using the award, because the idea here is that they're sponsoring another entity to actually carry out the activities of the award, and that's only permissible under the NACA program, specifically using the sponsoring entity model, which sounds like what you're discussing.
Okay, so even though their plan, perhaps, pending successful application, would be to spin or to incorporate as a 501c3, they haven't done that yet, but the sponsoring entity would be the Tribal Finance Corp. So it sounds like, from what you're recommending, or not recommending, but what you're saying is sponsoring entity might be the way to go.
Correct, because it sounds like what they're doing is creating a separate legal, what you're saying, 501c3 entity, which is a requirement and permissible under the sponsoring entity model.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm showing no further questions at this time.
All right, we'll give I know we have a small group, so we'll give everybody just another, maybe another minute or two to see if any other participants have any questions that they'd like to ask.
And just another quick reminder, to ask a question, press star 1. Okay, now, next question comes from Mr. Shelby. Your line is open.
Hi, everybody. My name is Caleb. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. This question is more for the FA application than it is for the NACA TA application. I think that there are several native CDFIs that over the historic years in this year's application, small dollar lending and lending that was tied to RRP, performance goals and measures, if not other anomalous sources of funding as well, are a significant portion of the historical lending. And for the FA guide, we've been asked to remove those lending from, those lending amounts from lending in eligible markets and target markets. And I'm concerned that readers and evaluators of the FA application it'll be hard to follow that story. And I'm wondering if you all have any particular thoughts on how we can communicate that story in a way that doesn't confuse evaluators of the application.
Hi, this is Tanya. I'm gonna just make sure I'm understanding your question. If I'm understanding you correctly, for the FA objective 1.1, which is the increase in lending volume, there's specific instruction if applicants have had, anomalous historic activity that's unusual, for example, paycheck protection program, to exclude that from historic activity so it won't inflate historic activity, thereby, precluding the applicant from applying for that FA objective. And you're concerned that perhaps if those loans are excluded, that it might not tell or may not provide some compelling information on the work that the applicant is doing. Is that your question? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, very close. By once removing amounts tagged to RRP, say for example, I think small dollars a little bit of a different situation, given that it's less about it being anomalous funding and more about it just being a separate pot of funding. But I'm concerned that the distance between what they'll end up reporting after excluding RRP, for example, and actual total loans closed, for some native CDFIs, it's quite a distance, and I worry that say in the narrative they're discussing historical EMTM lending after removing RRP performance goals and measures, and readers will be confused as to why then projected lending is actually lower or could be lower than total loans closed historically. And I just want to make sure that, evaluators of the application understand why RRP, for example, was peeled off of historical lending so that those native CDFIs aren't penalized for removing that from their historical lending. Does that make sense?
I think so. So I think there's might be a few different things going on with specifically with RRP and ERP. There are program policies and rules around those specific programs that loans that count toward the performance goals and measures that you may have under RRP and ERP cannot be double counted with other CDFI fund programs, and so which includes the CDFI program and the NACA program. So specifically, we provide instruction that in certain financial inputs that those loans that you're planning to count toward those other RRP and ERP are not included because in SDLP, because we don't want you to be in a situation where you're putting in loans that you may have intended to count toward those other programs, and in the projections you put in our application, and then you cannot eventually double count those. So you may inflate your numbers. And so I think that's one thing, and we just want to make sure that's clear. And then there's also some intersection there with the anomalous activity, because there's specific instruction in the application guidance that, because those loans should not be in the certain financial inputs, particularly the eligible market and target market activity that could feed into your performance goals and measures for the FA objectives, that, there's instruction in the application around that as well. And so that's the driver for that. So, but you can talk about, if you feel that lending is an important part of what your CDFI does, you can certainly talk about that in your narrative and talk about how it supports your mission. But, but you also have to keep in mind that there are very specific questions around the FA objectives and substantiating, and discussing and providing the appropriate responses in the application around the FA objectives as well.
Yeah.
And those dollar amounts will be included. You can include them in your total finance. There are certain financial inputs that are specific to your eligible market and target market that are broken out because we use those for your PG&S, and you can certainly include those lending dollars in your overall numbers. But there's a very specific reason why we need those dollars to be excluded in your eligible market, target market activities, because they can't be double counted with our program.
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. I think the main thing, piggybacking on the situation that you just described, I think that for non-native CDFIs as well, but obviously it's the NACA webinar. Like, there's a situation as well where the floors associated with that first FA objective, which inform projected lending, are in some cases lower than total loans closed historically because of the exclusion of RRP and anything else that meets the requirements in the FA guide. And I worry that that's a tenuous story that I want to make sure that evaluators understand. Like, it may be the case that you're above floors and eligible for the first FA objective, but are actually below total loans closed historically because of exclusion of RRP and anything else. And I want to just make sure those native CDFIs aren't, evaluated negatively because of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think it is often the case that the total, in many situations, the total historic lending is higher than the floor. that is used for the PG&M calculation for the reasons you cite and other reasons. And again, there are several opportunities, in the application narrative questions where applicants can speak to this if they feel like it's an important part of their story and what they're communicating in their application. But it's not something that that should negatively per se affect the applicant's evaluation.
Perfect. Great.
Because applicants are they are following the instruction that we're providing in the application. And CDFI fund policy for other programs. Other folks on, the CDFI fund folks, please chime in if to add to anything I'm saying if I'm not being clear.
Hi, this is Matthew. No, Tanya, I think you got the whole story, and I don't really have anything to add other than, Caleb, if you do find yourself in that exact scenario that you're describing, where it's appearing to be not a net increase in financial products in an EM or an eligible market target market, the application will bring up a very specific question where you would explain that. So there would be a direct opportunity to discuss exactly what you explained earlier.
Great. I appreciate the responses from y'all. I know that was a convoluted question, but yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, and I'm showing no further questions at this time.
All right. Again, since we do have a small group, we'll just give everybody a minute or two to just kind of think through, make sure that there are no other questions. Check back in a minute to see if any other questions come through.
One final reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star, then 1. Okay, and I'm showing no further questions at this time.
Okay. All right. Give us 1 second. Make sure. All right. Well, operator, just confirming no other questions. We're good?
Yep. Still no questions.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we will go ahead and wrap up today's Q&A session. Please note that, we are, if there is a question that comes up, if you have a follow-up from any of the items that we talked about on this call, or if you have another question that comes up after this call, please feel free to submit that question to us via service request or email, and we will do our best to get a response to you right away. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thank you. And that concludes today's conference. You may all disconnect at this time. Speakers.